And at that moment, it says, what is it, 47 minutes ago? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. What, if anything, did you perceive when you looked at that phone? Did it cause any concern for you?
With the other information that I had, it provided knowledge that the senders of those text messages.
Objection, Your Honor, is to speculation of what Mrs. Crumbley's knowledge was. That would be speculation.
So I don't think he got a chance to say, but
okay, can you repeat the question?
Yeah, but I just asked him to finish the answer because I don't think he's talking about her knowledge. But I don't. Talk to me about what you said. You did a search warrant for the electronics included, correct?
Yes, I was referring to my knowledge.
Yes, I know that. I was trying to let you finish, but go ahead.
So it provided me with information that the sender of these text messages were aware of the service.
Your Honor, this is, again, the sender of the text messages was aware. He cannot testify to what the sender of text messages was aware of. That's speculation.
Your Honor, I'll move on.
I guess it is.
This is information that he is receiving in real time to perform his duties of an investigation. We're simply trying to establish why and what he did next.
Yeah.
So
well, I think the jury gets it.
Okay.
And Your Honor, when I object, I would ask that the court consider the objection prior to Ms. McDonald.
Sustained.
Thank you.
Okay.
One moment. I have a right to respond to an objection because that's the court. Those are the court rules. I'm not going to ask the question before the court rules, but I do. I before the court rules on the objection.
Okay, but when she objected, you didn't respond to the objection.
I was trying to respond. I really was.
Okay.
I'm trying to explain to the court that this is what we're doing. So
okay. All right. Well, it's.
I'm not going to start asking questions without a ruling.
Okay.
Lieutenant, what concerned you about this, and what did you do next?
Concerned me because there was relevant information on electronic devices related to the shooting that had occurred. With that, I viewed the surveillance video from the school, and I also observed the firearm that was used in the shooting in preparation for the search warrant. So it helped me basically collect information that what we might be looking for in the home that we were seeking a search warrant for.
Okay. And do you know Special Agent Brandon from the ATF?
I do.
Okay, he testified early in these proceedings. Was he present with you at the school and assisted in any way?
I do remember seeing him in the school.
Okay. What did you do? Well, can you tell the jury what you requested in your affidavit for a search warrant and why?
What I requested was any and all evidence related to the homicide investigation, which included firearms, ammunition, firearms accessories like holsters or magazines, notes, receipts, electronic devices to include tablets, computers, cell phones, because we know that in these types of investigations, messages could be sent to other individuals that might be witnesses or be a part of that investigation in addition to plans. So I guess that's the gist of it.
At that point, were you informed or did you observe anything in the shooter's backpack that was found in one of the bathrooms?
I did not look through his backpack.
Okay, so what did you do next?
I had to have my laptop, because I left quickly. I had to have my laptop brought to me to the school, and I sat there, I typed out a search warrant and swore to that search warrant from the school. And then once it was authorized, I let my detectives that had secured that residence, that the judge had signed the court order, and they can begin searching.
Did you speak to any of the students in the school that day?
I did.
Who did you speak to?
I believe his name was Keegan.
And can you tell the court why you spoke to Keegan and where he was during the shooting?
I spoke to him very briefly. He was, when I talked to him, he was in one of the counselor's offices. And in my role, I was in a supervisory role over the detective bureau, so I was trying to assist Lieutenant Willis, and I was directing my detectives basically to handle the interviews. And then I had learned that Keegan had witnessed a homicide in the bathroom, and he was obviously very shaken up, and he was sitting in the counselor's office. Partly, I didn't want him to be alone, so I directed Detective Stevens to stay with him and gather information from him.
And that, do you know that victim's name? You're talking about Justin Schilling, correct?
Yes.
Okay. And did you speak to Keegan because he had information that you needed about the shooter?
Yes, he did have information about the shooter as well.
Okay. Was that bathroom the site of the last student that was murdered?
Yes.
Okay. Did you direct or ask anybody to go to the house after you wrote the search warrant or while you were writing it?
While I was writing it, I asked them to go to the house.
Do you remember who you asked?
At that
or I
time,
guess you ordered. But.
Several different detectives there at that time. Lieutenant Hicks before he was promoted, he was Sergeant Hicks, so he was my partner in the detective bureau. So I told them we need to get a team to go secure that house. I believe it was him, Detective Stoyak, and Detective Steele.
And what can you tell the jury what that means to secure the house?
Basically, it's a protected suite. So your purpose isn't to search for evidence yet while you're waiting for that search warrant to be signed, but you want to make sure there is no one in that structure destroying any evidence before you can get that search warrant, because obviously it does take time to draft the document and get the judge to authorize it. So it was basically preventative from allowing stuff to be destroyed or taken out of the house.
Prior to drafting the search warrant, did you watch any surveillance video?
I did.
Can you tell the jury what you viewed?
I watched the surveillance video of that south hallway. I believe of the 200 hallway shows the shooter going into the bathroom, coming out moments later, and then immediately the shooter began firing on students as he walked east down that hallway.
Were you able to determine what weapon was used?
Yes.
How did you determine that?
The weapon, by the time I saw that weapon, it was already brought to the front of the school. Crime lab specialist Rachel Grace had it in her possession. It was collected in an evidence box, and it was a SIG 9mm handgun.
Okay, how long did it take the search for the search warrants to be signed and authorized by a judge?
Probably it was under an hour, I would say.
Okay, and what did you do once you obtained a search warrant?
I called, I can't remember which detective I called, but one of the detectives on scene, I told them that it had been authorized.
When you say on scene, you mean?
I'm sorry, on scene, at the house.
All right, and when you say the house, you're talking about 112 East Street in Oxford, correct?
Correct.
Okay, and just for the record, did you determine who lives there?
I did.
And who lives there?
The shooter lived there. James and Jennifer Crumbley lived there as well.
Had you met any of those three people before that day?
No.
Okay. Did you have an opportunity to meet Jennifer Crumbley?
Yes.
Do you see her in the courtroom today?
I do. She's sitting at the defense table with glasses and a gray jacket on.
All right. May the record reflect he's properly identified the defendant.
The record will so reflect.
Do you remember about what time that you arrived on scene at the house?
I would say it was about 6:30 p.m.
Okay. What did you do?
The detectives there were already searching the residence. I checked on them, making sure that.
Okay, I want to back up because we can't assume. How did they know that the search warrant was authorized?
I called and told one of them.
Okay, and once you make that call, then you instruct them to start the search?
Yes.
Okay. How long do you think that they had been searching by the time you got there?
Maybe an hour.
Okay. What did you observe when you arrived? Was there anything going on outside, or was everybody inside?
Everybody was inside. I think there was uniformed cars outside as security.
Okay, did you just have individuals from the Oakland County Sheriff's Office, or were there other law enforcement agencies?
Brett Brandon from the ATF was there as well.
Okay, Special Agent Brandon?
Yes.
All right. Did you have an opportunity to interact with Jennifer Crumbley?
I did.
Can you tell the jury how that came to be?
They were not there when I first arrived. They ended up showing up, I would say probably about 15 minutes later. Them, by they, I mean James and Jennifer.
Did someone ask them to return to the home?
I believe so.
And do you know who that was?
I'm not 100% sure.
Did you ask that they return to the home?
I did not. I did not have contact with them prior.
Okay. Did you want them to return to the home?
Yes.
Why?
They had cell phones in their possession.
Okay. In a typical homicide case, do you seize the parents' phones?
If I determine that there's relevant information to the homicide investigation, yes.
Okay. Can you tell the jury why you thought, I assume, were their phones, did you think they were relevant to the investigation?
Yes.
And can you tell the jury why?
Based on the information I learned at the school, I learned that a parent had been there earlier in the day with the shooter regarding drawings that were made on an assignment that were disturbing. Also, I had observed the shooter's phone that had messages that were related to the shooting.
And was there a particular message on that screenshot that made you want to search the phone?
Yes.
What was it?
Ethan, don't do it.
And who sent that text?
Mom, Jennifer Crumbley.
All right. Can you explain what happened when Jennifer and James Crumbley returned to the home?
The search was still ongoing by detectives, so I had them sit in the front living room when they came in. I explained to them the process. James had asked for an itemized list of the items that were taken out of the home, and I explained to them that we'd leave a copy of the search warrant, the court order authorizing what we were taking, and then we'd leave tabulations, basically a receipt, just documenting what items that we had taken. I instructed them that I did need both of their cell phones.
And then how did Jennifer react to that? She was not happy about that. Okay, when you say she wasn't happy, what do you mean? Describe what that means.
She did not want to give me her phone. She seemed irritated about it initially. She was not turning it over promptly.
Did she say, I'm not giving it to you, or I don't want to give it to you, or did she say anything?
I don't remember the exact language, but I believe it was that she did not want to give it to me.
Okay, then what happened?
I explained to her that, it's part of the court order, part of the search warrant, and it was necessary that we collect the cell phone. That's when James interrupted and basically explained to her he's going to get that cell phone one way or another, might as well just turn it over to him. And then she did turn it over.
And when you say she turned it over, what does that mean? She gave it to you?
She handed it to me.
Okay. And what did you do next?
She was concerned about having phone numbers for family members. I took a sheet of paper and I allowed her to write down necessary phone numbers out of her phone. And then
I want to back up a bit. How did you get into the phone?
She gave me the password.
Okay. I'm sorry, I got to make a clear record. Was it password protected?
I believe it was, yes.
Okay, and how did you get the password?
She provided the password to me.
And can you tell the jury what that exchange was like?
Again, she did not want to give the password. We have the capabilities, obviously, with our computer crimes unit. When we have a search warrant, we can bypass the security.
Did you explain that to her?
I believe I did.
Okay. And did you tell her that that's what you were going to do if she didn't give the password?
Yes.
Okay, so did she finally give it to you?
Yes.
All right. And then you said you allowed her to write down some things. What did she write down?
She wrote down some phone numbers from contacts out of her phone.
All right, and Did you instruct the defendants to do anything after you seized their phones?
Yes.
Can you tell the jury what that was?
I told them they needed to contact and they needed to get, she was concerned about being able to call people, so I instructed her she could go get a replacement, basically a prepaid phone from a local store, and that it was important that we had that number, that she was to contact either myself or Sergeant Joe Bryan.
Did you ask them, ask her to do that in a timely way, or did you not mention when they should provide that?
I don't recall specific language, but I believe it was important that we had that number that night. I don't remember what my wording was, but I would say timely, yes.
Okay, are you aware if they did provide those new phone numbers?
They did not provide it to me. I don't know if they provided it to Sergeant Bryan or not.
Okay. What is the protocol when you seize a phone and there's a search warrant to search the information on a phone?
First thing I do is I put it into airplane mode. That way it cannot be remotely wiped. So once we put it in airplane mode, it's basically, again, a preservation to prevent the destruction of what on that phone.
Okay. The exchange about the seizing of the phones, what did you say in response to that resistance, if anything?
I believe I just explained it wasn't an option not to take the phone. It was a court order, and I was trying to be professional about it and say, we're going to take the phone, and I didn't want her to try and resist us taking the phone.
Was there any discussion about the students who were injured or killed in that school by the defendant?
Not by the defendant, no.
Did you say anything about that?
Yes.
What did you say?
I could tell she was kind of frustrated about the situation, the phone, things like that, and I explained to her.
Your Honor, objection to hearsay as to what this officer said.
His statements are, what is the objection?
About what she said to your client, what he said to your client?
About what he said to my client. My client's statements are clearly not hearsay. I'm objecting to what he said to my client as hearsay.
He's the declarant. It's not an out of court statement. He's the actual person testifying. And additionally, this is giving context to the exchange at the house with the defendant.
Your Honor, there is no I said it exception to hearsay, so even though he's the declarant, there's no I said it exception where he can still testify to hearsay.
That's true.
Your Honor, I believe that his statements about what he did during the investigation, which I've elicited several times while he's been on the stand, are relevant to show what he did and why he did it.
Just because there have been things that I have not objected to doesn't mean that I couldn't have objected to. But I'm objecting at this point. It's not legally correct.
Okay, so I guess one question is whether they're being offered for the truth of the matter asserted.
If they are, can I respond to that?
Yeah, well, let me back up a little bit. Mrs. Crumbley did not ask you a question about that, about what happened if there are fatalities at the school.
Correct.
Okay, go ahead.
His statement to Mrs. Crumbley about what happened at the school is not being offered to prove what happened at the school. We've proven that 100 different ways, unfortunately. It's being offered to show what he did and the response of the defendant.
Yeah, I'm going to allow it. It's not being offered for the truth of the matter asserted, right?
Thank you. What did you say to the defendant?
I told her that there were several dead kids and kids that were shot in the school, and this was significant incidents and was already on the national news, and even the president had addressed it.
How did you know that?
From seeing the news cameras outside and speaking to other people on scene.
All right. Was Jennifer Crumbley crying?
No.
Was Jennifer Crumbley, what were her mannerisms or gestures at that point?
She seemed irritated and frustrated. I remember taking notes down, and she made a statement to me saying that lives were lost today and he's going to have to suffer. And I found that odd, the way she said it.
Why?
Because she was referring to a person that was her son. Again, I've been involved in multiple homicide investigations where I've talked to relatives and parents that their children had taken lives, and normally it was.
Your Honor, I'm objecting to the relevance of what other people have said. Obviously, her statement is allowed. The detective testified to what she said, but drawing conclusions about what she was thinking as she said it is speculation.
Response?
He's not drawing conclusions about what she was thinking. He's drawing conclusions about what he was thinking. He said he found it odd, and I'm asking him why. And I think in the course of this investigation, an officer's perceptions about the defendant's statements, and they're being odd compared to what he sees in over 100 different homicide investigations, are absolutely relevant. In addition, we are proving our burden, as the court instructed the jury, is to prove gross negligence and what a person using ordinary care would have to do to prevent injury or death to somebody else. And her statements and how they compare to any person, reasonable, ordinary person, are definitely relevant.
Your Honor, I'm sorry, I have to continue, I have to argue based on this argument. This detective, who is very experienced, has never investigated a mass shooting at a school. So he does not have awareness of how parents of mass shooters typically respond, because this is a first.
I don't think he said that. I think he has interviewed or had contact with parents whose children have killed people before. So to the extent that you're speculating about, you hadn't met her before this, right?
Correct, Judge.
So, okay, so you can't speculate about what she's thinking, how she's feeling, how she would normally respond. Okay, there's some people that, when someone falls, they laugh, which might seem inappropriate, but that's how that person is, right? But you can testify about your experience, why you thought it was odd based on your experience in interacting with other parents who had children who had killed people.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
Yes, Judge.
Okay, all right.
Can you continue with why you felt it was odd? Can you tell the jury?
Yes, the language of suffer struck me as odd. Most of my experience as well, even.
I want to stop you. What do you mean suffer? Explain to me what you mean the language of suffer.
Said he's going to have to suffer.
Okay, I'm sorry, go ahead.
Most of my experience as well, there's going to be consequences, or, we understand the severity of the situation, that the choice of words suffered was odd to me.
Okay, all right. Nothing further. Cross.
Thank you. Detective, when you testified about the giving Mrs. Crumbley the search warrant for the phone, it's fair to say, at least to your knowledge, Mrs. Crumbley has never had a search warrant to take her phone away from her, correct?
I don't have any knowledge of that.
And when she was expressing concerns to you about not having her cell phone, one of those concerns was that she would not have phone numbers to people on her contact list. Is that true?
Yes, that's why I allowed her to copy her contact list.
She also expressed concern that if she didn't have her phone, she would have no way to call people. I guess what I'm saying is that was the only phone of Mrs. Crumbley that you were taking with the search warrant, correct?
I'm sorry, you said that was the only phone?
You took one phone for Mrs. Crumbley.
Yes.
You don't believe she had other cell phones at that time?
I would not know if she did or not.
So when you were taking that cell phone, if that was her only phone, it would be fair to say she wouldn't have a phone to use after that.
Yes, that's why I suggested she go purchase another phone from a store that was open.
You suggested she go and purchase what some people refer to as burner phones or track phones?
A prepaid phone, yes.
So you can go to a store, buy a prepaid phone, and it'll have a different phone number, correct?
Yes.
And you advised the Crumbleys in order to have phones, go ahead and buy these phones.
I suggested, yes, you should buy another phone and provide that number to us.
You did allow Mrs. Crumbley to sit down and write contact numbers out so that she could put them in whatever phone she bought.
Yes,
And you're aware that by that night, the Crumbleys did purchase track phones? And if you're not aware, just let me know.
I learned later in the investigation, but I wasn't involved in that part of it.
Okay, fair enough. Again, very quickly, you had never met with or had any dealings with Mrs. Crumbley.
That's correct.
You have never seen her react to anything in life, a pet dying, a person dying, bad news about a job, anything like that.
My only encounter with her was at that house.
Thank you, I have no further questions.
Nothing further, may this witness be excused.
You can step down.
Thank you, Judge.
Who's the next witness?
David Hendrick.
David, I'm sorry, can you say the last name? Hendrick?
Hendrick, yes, Judge. He's in the hallway.
Good morning. Do you raise your right hand? Do you swear or affirm the testimony you're about to give is the truth so help you God?
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, please be seated, and will you state your name for the record and spell your first and last name?
David Hendrick, DavidHendrick.
Go ahead, prosecutor.
Thank you. Sir, are you currently a member with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office?
I am not.
Okay. And were you at one point?
I was
How long did you work with the Sheriff's Office?
34 years.
And you recently retired?
I did.
Congratulations.
Thank you.
I would like to direct your attention to the days around November the 30th, 2021. When you retired, what was your rank?
Detective Sergeant,
And what unit were you assigned to?
the Fugitive Apprehension Team.
If you could, sir, please tell the jury what is the Fugitive Apprehension Team?
It is a team made up of a handful of sheriff's detectives that go out and look for people wanted for felony warrants. We either felony warrants that are issued by the Sheriff's Department or Sheriff's Department cases, or other law enforcement agencies in the county that have requested our assistance in locating those individuals.
Okay. And as of November of 2021, how long have you been assigned to the Fugitive Apprehension Team?
4 years, I believe.
Okay. And did you retire out of that unit?
I did.
So all told, how long did you spend as a detective sergeant in the Fugitive Apprehension Team?
A little over 6.
6 years? Okay. Now, what roles did you have with the Oakland County Sheriff's Office before you were in the Fugitive Team?
Prior to that, I was assigned to our Special Investigations Unit for approximately 10 years.
And that's the unit that Lieutenant Willis heads up right now?
That is correct.
Okay. And what about before that?
Prior to that, I was assigned to our Auto Theft Unit for a period of time. All those as sergeants. I was also assigned into our Auto Theft Unit as a deputy prior to getting promoted to sergeant, and as a patrol investigator, which is a substation detective prior to that.
Okay.
For a few years.
And then prior to that, were you on the road as a patrol deputy?
I was.
In your 6 years working with the Fugitive Apprehension Team, could you put a number on how many fugitives you've sought?
Hundreds.
Okay.
Several hundred.
That's probably a conservative number.
Yes.
Now, are you trained to locate someone who does not want to be caught?
Yes.
Now, what are some things that a person might do if they don't want to be located?
Leave their residence. They often will stop communicating with family, friends, things of that nature.
Okay. What about funds?
Yes, a lot of times they will try to rely on cash.
Why is that?
I think it's harder to track any type of financial transaction, if you're using cash.
Okay. Now, as a detective sergeant in the fugitive apprehension team, would it be fair to say that one of the first places you look for someone is at a home of a friend or family?
Yes,
Okay. So then would it be wise to not go somewhere where everybody knows who you are?
sure.
Now, specifically to the days after well, first of all, do you recall the Oxford High School shooting on November the 30th of 2021?
I do.
Okay. And were you working at that point?
I was not working that day.
Okay. So you didn't respond to the shooting scene itself, would that be right?
That is correct.
But you were with the fugitive apprehension team then?
Yes,
Okay. Now, in the day or days after the shooting, were you asked to locate James and Jennifer Crumbley?
yes.
And do you recall who tasked you with that assignment?
I believe Lieutenant Willis.
Okay. Tim Willis right here at the table?
Yes.
Okay. Do you recall when you were given that assignment?
I believe, not 100% positive, I believe it was the 2nd of December.
Okay. So the shooting was Tuesday the 30th, Wednesday the 1st would be the following day, then Thursday the 2nd. You think around that day?
I believe it was that day.
Okay. Now, what information did you have at your disposal when you were tasked with this assignment?
We had their basic information and their address, things of that, vehicles that they drove, things of that nature.
Okay. So were you aware that their personal cell phones had been seized?
I believe we were, yes.
Okay. Were you aware that they had obtained track phones?
I don't recall if I was aware of that initially. I believe we were, yes.
Okay, that's fair. So what's the first thing you do when what is the first thing you did when you were tasked with this assignment?
Assigned the different members of my team to go out and check addresses, start looking for vehicles, start checking local hotels, things of that nature.
Okay, so when you say check addresses, what sort of addresses?
Family addresses, friends,
Okay.
the home address.
Now, did you or a member of your team, were you able to uncover information that they stayed at a hotel November the 30th, 2021?
I believe so, but the specifics of what hotel I don't recall.
Okay, that's fair. You said you had the James and Jennifer's vehicles identified at that point.
Correct.
Okay, were you made aware that a vehicle was located?
Yes.
Tell me about that, please.
That vehicle was located in the city of Auburn Hills,
Where at in the city of Auburn Hills?
in an extended stay hotel,
Okay. And do you recall which day it was located?
December 2nd.
Correct. And what did you?
I misspoke, December 3rd.
Okay. December
Located in
3rd.
the afternoon of December 3rd.
Okay. So when you received that information, what did you do?
I had everybody respond to that area to set up surveillance on that vehicle, check the hotel to see if they were still registered guests there.
Okay. And did you come to find out that they had been registered guests, they left that morning?
Yes, I'm not sure the exact date they left, but it very well could have been that morning.
Okay. It's fair to say that they left and they left that vehicle there. Is that correct? Okay. So did you have a team member sitting on that vehicle conducting surveillance?
Yes,
Right. Did they ever return to retrieve that vehicle?
no,
And do you recall the type of vehicle that was?
I do not.
If I said Kia, does that sound right to you?
That does sound right.
Okay. At that point in time, well, by that point in time, were you aware that they had obtained the track phones?
Yes,
Okay. Did you learn at that point in time that they had obtained another set of phones as well?
I don't believe I knew that.
Okay. So that would be new information to you.
Yes,
Now, at the time the Kia was found, you said it was the afternoon of December the 3rd. That would have been a Friday. You had detectives conducting surveillance?
correct.
Okay. And tell us what happened next, please.
Well, we sat and watched the vehicle all afternoon and all evening,
Of Friday the 3rd?
Friday the 3rd.
Okay.
And it was later in the evening of Friday the 3rd that I was made aware that their other vehicle had been located
And where was that located?
in the city of Detroit.
Okay. Now, prior to discovering that their other vehicle was located in the city of Detroit, were you aware that James and Jennifer Crumbley had been formally charged at noon on Friday the 3rd?
I was.
And what did you do with that information?
At that point, myself and one of the other detectives went to what we learned as their attorney's office and attempted to locate the vehicle that we had not found yet. And I spoke to their attorney.
Okay, and why did you do that?
Well, I wanted to make sure that she was aware that a warrant had been issued and introduce myself as the person that was looking for them and try to broker a safe, event-free surrender.
Okay, and were you able to do that?
I was not.
Did the defendant or her husband ever show up at that office?
Not the time we were there.
Okay. And that was Friday, December the 3rd. Do you recall approximately what time you went there?
Midday, noonish, around shortly after noon.
And how long was that meeting at Jennifer Crumbley's attorney's office?
10 minutes. We weren't there very long.
All right, what happened next?
We continued to do surveillance in the area in the event that they did show up back at the office. And then once the car was located, we responded to the first car being located at the extended stay.
So I take it the fugitive apprehension team doesn't just sit and wait when somebody doesn't show up at their attorney's office. So were other steps being taken?
Yes.
Tell me about that, please.
I had several other members of the team checking different addresses, checking hotels, all the things that we would normally do, continually looking.
Okay. And were you working with other law enforcement agencies at this point in time?
There were other law enforcement agencies that were offering their help, and they were actively looking in their areas as well.
Okay, and what agencies were those?
I believe the U.S. Marshals, the Border Patrol. I have received calls from the ATF. I know I believe the state police were looking, the Detroit police were looking. Everybody in the general area was looking for the vehicle that was still unaccounted for.
Okay, and is that something that typically happens in a fugitive situation?
Depends on the case. One of this magnitude, yes, that information would have been put out as a, be on the lookout for that vehicle.
Okay. So as the detective sergeant in the fugitive team, you were the one fielding these offers for assistance?
Yes.
Okay. So, sir, at this point in time, you have been tasked with this assignment by Lieutenant Willis, is that correct?
Correct.
So who do you apprise of progress in a fugitive situation?
In this particular case, I was apprising Lieutenant Willis and also Under Sheriff McCabe.
Okay.
He was calling me for regular updates.
And that's wholly a law enforcement function, would that be correct?
Yes.
Okay, as in the sheriff's office, or if the Border Patrol or FBI or ATF were working with you?
Yes.
Now, after you had the detective sitting in Auburn Hills, and after you had been conducting surveillance at Jennifer Crumbley's attorney's office, do you recall what city that was?
Bluefield Township, I believe.
Okay. What you said you were notified of the vehicle being found in Detroit?
Yes.
Okay, do you recall the approximate time that occurred?
I think it was close to 11 p.m., maybe shortly before 11 p.m.
Okay. If I told you that the charges were formally read on noon on Friday the 3rd, would that sound correct?
Yes.
So tell me what happened when you received that information that another vehicle, the Crumbley's, was located in Detroit.
At that point, I instructed one of my detectives to maintain contact with the vehicle that we had found earlier in the day. And then I pulled everybody else and we headed toward the address in Detroit.
Okay. When you say everybody else, were people doing different things in different locations?
Yes, I mean, several of the guys were right there on the car because that was the one thing that we knew we had. So
Okay.
they were sitting there. So yes, I pulled everybody off of that location and any other task that they were doing to head to Detroit.
Okay, what other tasks were other detectives doing if they weren't conducting surveillance?
Just searching records, looking for anything they could find that might lead us somewhere else.
Okay. How many members, if you can tell us approximately, are in the fugitive apprehension team?
At that time, I believe we had 7.
Okay. And were all 7 detectives assigned to this task?
Yes,
All right. Did you learn the address of the building where that second vehicle was found?
I did.
Okay. They said 1111 Bellevue Street in Detroit. Does that sound right to you?
That sounds correct.
Give us an idea of where that is in the city of Detroit.
It would be, I guess, on the east side of Detroit near Belle Isle, just a couple blocks in from Jefferson there, which is the main drag that runs along there.
Okay, so close. So we're oriented near the Detroit River?
Yes.
Okay. And what's at that location?
That is an industrial building that it was multiple floors and had multiple different suites or rooms in it.
Okay. Tell me your observation when you arrived at that location.
When we first arrived, the Detroit Police Department was there. They had the vehicle blocked off so nobody could get in or out of the parking lot. It was the only vehicle I recall being in the parking lot. And there were several Detroit officers on scene at that point.
When we say several officers, are we talking about 5 or 6, or we're talking about more of that?
More than that.
Give us an idea of how many officers were on scene.
At that particular point, when we arrived there was probably 15, 20.
Okay. And did additional law enforcement personnel arrive as the night wore on?
They did.
Okay. And all told, could you give us an idea of how many police or federal agents were there on scene?
I'm guessing by the end of the night, there were probably around 100, I'm
Okay.
guessing.
And we say the end of the night. Did the night end with the apprehension of the defendant?
It did as far as my team was concerned,
Okay.
yes.
So by that point in time, there were over 100 law enforcement personnel on scene.
I would estimate.
So you said you recalled being notified that the second vehicle was located in Detroit around 11 p.m. on Friday the 3rd.
I believe shortly before 11, but around 11.
Okay. Do you recall about what time you arrived there?
We got down there pretty quick that hour of night, probably 15, 20 minutes.
Okay. And so we're talking about 11:10, 11:15-ish, and I don't want to guess, so just tell me if that sounds right.
Or a little bit earlier.
Or a little bit earlier, okay. And there were already about 15 or so, at least, officers on scene?
Yes.
All right. So once you arrived on scene, did you coordinate with other officers?
Yes, I talked to whoever was in charge, the sergeant or the lieutenant, I'm not sure what his rank was, of the Detroit Police Department that was there.
And then was a plan formed to search that industrial building?
Yes.
Tell me about that.
As more officers arrived, we were able to gain access to the building, and we kind of formulated a plan that several of us would search the second and I believe 3rd floor of the building, and the Detroit Police Department was going to search, their SWAT team was going to search the 1st floor of the building.
And sir, you've been a part of searches for fugitives in buildings in the past, I take it?
Yes.
Okay, give us an idea of what that looks like.
It's a very slow, methodical process. You slowly approach every door. You do your best to make sure that obviously no one gets hurt inside or outside. You make entry in, and then you search every place inside of the room you're in that could possibly hold an individual.
Okay. Is this a quiet endeavor or is noise made?
It can be quite noisy.
Okay. And it's quite noisy the night of December the 3rd, 2021?
Yes, it was very noisy.
So you had, I think you said 7 detectives at your disposal in your particular team?
Yes.
Okay. And there were other teams conducting searches at the same time?
Yes.
So each team was searching different areas of the building, would that be right?
Yes, we searched. Each team kind of was responsible for a certain floor of the building.
Okay. And were there police vehicles on the perimeter of this building?
Yes.
Give us an idea of how many police vehicles you saw.
Dozens.
Now, sir, did you subsequently learn that an acquaintance of the defendant, Jennifer Crumbley, had a studio in that industrial building?
I learned that at some point, yes.
Okay, so you weren't involved in the actual apprehension of the defendant or her husband, is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, and tell us, if you know, how the apprehension occurred.
I believe that when the Detroit Police SWAT team searched that room, they were located inside of that room.
Okay, and do you recall the time that occurred, where they were found?
Approximately 1 o'clock in the morning, I would think.
Okay, so
somewhere
that'd
in
be Saturday, December the 4th?
Yes,
After they were apprehended, were they turned over to you?
yes.
Okay, and then what happened?
Myself, and 2 other officers transported them directly back to the sheriff's office. They were in each of their vehicles and I was following.
Okay, and just so the record is clear, do you see Jennifer Crumbley in court today?
I do.
Can you please point her, describe something she's wearing today?
A gray blazer.
Would the record reflect identification to defendant charge?
Record will reflect the court identification of the defendant.
I have nothing further.
Thank you. Morning, afternoon, good morning. You have obviously a lot of experience with law enforcement, correct?
Yes, ma'am.
In addition to your position where you're tasked with tracking down fugitives, you also have additional experience as a police officer who has arrested people in the past, correct?
Yes,
And there are different ways that a person accused of a crime can come into custody of the sheriff's department. Is that a fair statement?
yes,
Okay, so if you see a crime take place, you can immediately go and arrest that person upon seeing a crime take place.
yes,
You have the ability to go to the court, present facts, and ask the court to sign an arrest warrant. Is that correct?
yes,
Now, if an arrest warrant is issued and outstanding, if a police officer were to pull someone over for a traffic stop that had a warrant, they could be taken into custody at that point.
yes,
And that has happened before, where during a routine traffic stop, you see, oh my gosh, this person has a warrant, yes?
yes,
It's also possible when warrants are issued that there are arrangements, and you're not a part of this. The defense attorney and the prosecutor can make arrangements for the defendant to turn themselves in to the court.
I can't speak to arrangements that would be made between the attorneys.
It's possible, though, for arrangements to be made that you're not a part of making, correct?
I would have possibly, yes.
There are people who, when they have an outstanding arrest warrant, show up to the court to get what's called arraigned on the warrant.
Yes,
Now, you testified, and I think at one point you said you were sort of watching the vehicle, the Kia, on December 2nd. Was that incorrect, or was it December 3rd?
it was December 3rd.
Okay, so on December 3rd, you began watching the Kia that was in the hotel parking lot at what time?
Midday, I don't recall the exact time.
So you began watching the vehicle, the Kia, midday, and you never saw either of the Crumbleys return to that Kia, correct?
Correct.
It was midday on the 3rd that the prosecutor's office announced there was a warrant out for Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley.
Correct.
And on that day, you did not speak with Mr. or Mrs. Crumbley. They did not make any statements to you, correct?
Correct.
You testified that you stopped by an attorney's office. It's fair to say that was my office.
That's correct.
And we met very briefly, actually in the hallway of my office.
Correct.
And during that meeting, I told you, I am trying to make arrangements for my client with the prosecutor.
Judge, I have to object. Counsel can't be a lawyer and a witness. The court has talked about this as early as March of 2022.
Correct.
We have a
I'll
waiver.
withdraw, I'm
We're at
sorry,
that point.
I'll withdraw the question. If there were any arrangements being made between a lawyer and the prosecutor, you're not aware of those arrangements, correct?
Correct.
Do you pay attention if the lawyer files an appearance with the court, letting the court know Mrs. Crumbley has a lawyer?
Not typically, no.
So you would not be aware if Mrs. Crumbley had officially hired a lawyer and they filed an appearance saying, I'm representing Mrs. Crumbley?
Normally, no.
So that night, you testified that ultimately you ended up over in Detroit where the other vehicle of Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley was found.
Correct.
Now, when the other vehicle of Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley was found, you have no idea how that vehicle got to Detroit.
Correct.
You have no idea if Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley rode in the car together or if one of them drove that vehicle there.
Correct.
You also have no idea why they may have left a vehicle at the hotel in Auburn Hills, correct?
Correct.
And knowing that they stayed at a hotel in Auburn Hills, we can agree that Auburn Hills is close to this courthouse.
Correct.
Auburn Hills is located in between essentially this courthouse and Oxford. Is that a fair statement? And I don't know the geography real well, even though I live there.
You could say that.
Okay, so we know that one of their vehicles is local in Auburn Hills, correct?
Correct.
And the location in Detroit is less than an hour from here.
Correct.
Now, when you went to that building where Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley were ultimately found, that building you described as an industrial building, correct?
Yes.
You testified that there are multiple suites within the building.
Yes.
And it's fair to say there are several businesses that operate out of that building.
Yes.
It is not an abandoned building.
No.
It is not an abandoned warehouse.
No.
So if there were ever comments made that Mrs. Crumbley was found in an abandoned warehouse, that was simply incorrect.
It was not an abandoned warehouse.
Correct. Your testimony was that at approximately 1:00 a.m. on the 4th, so later that night, that was specifically when Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley were located in that building, correct?
Correct.
And to your knowledge, they were found in an art studio where a business had an operating art studio.
I'm not sure what actually was in the studio. I never actually entered the studio.
The portion of the building that Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley were in was not some abandoned, barred up area of the building that was vacant.
Correct.
So there was a business or something going on in that studio. I just want to make it clear that it wasn't something that was abandoned, where no one was going or using over time prior to that day.
I don't know what took place in that studio. I never entered that studio, but I do not believe it was an abandoned studio.
So they were ultimately apprehended around 1:00 in the morning.
Correct.
And do you have knowledge, and if you're not the right witness, please let me know, of what Mr. and Mrs. Crumbley were doing when they were apprehended at 1:00 in the morning?
I have no idea. I was not in there.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah?
Sure.
Sir, the fugitive apprehension team, your function is to find the fugitive. Would that be right?
That's correct.
Okay. And this is a law enforcement function.
Yes.
Okay, and you were given your directives by Lieutenant Tim Willis of the Special Investigative Unit.
Yes, sir.
He's the officer in charge of this investigation.
Yes.
Now, the rooms that you cleared, they weren't homes, apartments, or lofts, correct?
No.
Okay.
No.
Thank you. Nothing further.
All right, you may step down and you're excused.
Connor, can we have a quick bathroom break?
Sure. 10 minutes? What's that?
All right, spare the jury.
This is the I don't know.
I'm gonna find out.
I'll let you know as soon as I know. I don't know, but I don't care.